Thank you, Carter. Welcome, everyone. Today, we're going to be going over the Clean Energy Career Pathway, NOFO. So I hope you've all had a chance to take a look at it, but if you haven't, hopefully today I can walk you through some of the important components. After I'm done, Josh, my colleague Josh Coons, will actually be jumping on and he will be going over all the financial budget portions of this notice of funding opportunity. So thanks again. If you have questions, probably throw them in the chat. I might not be able to see them right away, but I'll get to them. And if we at the end we can also just go over any questions that you have. It looks like it's going to be kind of a smaller group, so we might be able to just answer some of those questions. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and pull up the PowerPoint. Sometimes when the PowerPoint is in oops, when I'm presenting, you can't really see the chat. But anyway, like I said, we'll just take care of questions as we go, or if we have to, toward the end. But again, thank you so much for joining today. We're talking about the Clean Energy Career Pathway NOFO. Just for a quick little idea of our agenda, we're going to talk about the program, talk about the actual application process, talk about the technical assistance. Today is your big portion of technical assistance because you're going to hear the program piece and the financial piece, but we are going to incorporate some office hours. So as you take this information back and start working on your application, you may have questions that come up. So we're going to show you some opportunities to jump on for some office hours and get more individual attention on that as well. So to start, I just want to give you a little background of this notice of funding opportunity. The purpose is to provide funding to eligible entities to support planning a clean energy pathway and then support the implementation of that pathway. This will include aligning curriculum and work-based learning opportunities. This funding opportunity is seeking eligible entities that will work with their local workforce innovation areas. And if you're not really familiar about the local workforce innovation areas, that is something that we would be able to assist you with as you're working on that application. And you would also need to work with employers. This pathway should include technical and employability skills with dual credit options for the learners. So to make sure that you are an eligible entity for this notice of funding application, notice of funding opportunity, and doing the application, you would need to be defined as one of the following: ROE, which is Regional Office of Education, an intermediate service center, state institutions of higher ed, laboratory schools, public university laboratory schools approved by ISB, vocational centers, charter schools, co-ops, schools operated by an ROE or ISC, and any type of school district could also apply. But the key is it's in the yellow box at the top. Eligible applicants must partner with a community college, a local workforce innovation area, and an employer for this funding opportunity. The target population is going to be in-school youth with one or more barriers to employment. In-school youth for this specific opportunity is going to be defined as youth aged 14 to 21 currently attending secondary school, that's including alternative schools, and has not yet received their high school diploma or equivalent. The barriers for this opportunity would be classified as youth that are classified as low income. So those are that would be your target population. The next is the timeline. The grant is going to be a 2-year grant. However, the first year can be a planning period because part of the grant, and you'll see as this goes on, is going to be incorporating some curriculum, modernizing your classroom, providing professional development. So you could have the first year as a planning period. The second year, then you would be required to pilot the actual career pathway program. Planning periods also, if you're thinking about this and maybe you wouldn't need as much, that you wouldn't need that full year, planning periods could be less than a year. We could work with you to get that implementation and see if you're ready, and then you could just start implementing. Program requirements. This grant requires career pathway alignment. The link to the Career Pathways Dictionary provides common language and definitions. Also, programs of study are important for this program. Expanding opportunities and obtaining credentials is a must. There is more information, additional information in the Notice of Funding Opportunity. For instance, here I have the link to the Career Pathways Dictionary. That is something that is also linked in the Notice of Funding Opportunity that you can click on, and we're actually going to talk about it a little bit later down on these slides too. But just to start thinking about if you needed some additional information, they're also listed in the NOFO. Curriculum alignment. So we do have right here on the slide, on the right-hand side here, the Clean Jobs Curriculum Framework. This is something that our CG team already uses, and there's components. If you can see the components, it's kind of, oops, sorry about that. If you can see the components there, it has the pre-assessments, the personal effective skills, the workplace skills, the clean energy basics, and then the transitions into eventually the job services. So it gives you, and again, this is right in the NOFO, so you can look at it and see more information on it, but it's going to give you that framework. You can use that framework, or you can kind of create your own, but in doing so, you would need to incorporate the left-hand side elements into your curriculum alignment. So again, you'll be able to see the details. I put a picture really quickly there on the slide, but you'll be able to look through that and see kind of which route you want to go. But the bottom line is you would have to have curriculum alignment. This is the Career Pathway Dictionary I was just talking about. So the link is provided in the opportunity and here. These are the partners that have worked on this dictionary. So you can see I am from the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. So our department was, our agency was involved in helping create this dictionary. And as you can see, the Board of Higher Ed, the State Board of Education, Student Assistance Commission, Department of Employment, Employment Security, and the Community College Board, just to name a few that have also been in partnership to create this dictionary. This is kind of the second edition. The first one it didn't quite look like this, but after a period of time, we got back together and realigned it and updated some definitions. But if you've never seen this before, it's a very good site. You can go to it. It's really good for common language definitions, and then seeing like sometimes there's might even be examples of things. So again, that is posted right in the Notice of Funding Opportunity. Same with Program of Study. There's more information in the opportunity, but you would need a coordinated sequence of academic and technical content from secondary to post-secondary. So you see that alignment. In that program of study, there can be multiple entry and exit points, but it has to also incorporate a credential in there. The implementation, this NOFO aims to increase career opportunities for in-school youth in the clean energy sector. So when you're implementing your program, make sure your strategies are flexible. While writing your application, consider equity, outreach, engagement, planning, assessment, strategies, services, placement, and follow-up. These again are all listed in the Notice of Funding Opportunity, so you'll be able to get more information on that. But just as today, when you're thinking about maybe if you haven't started writing it yet and you're just thinking about what things I might need to incorporate, or if you're brainstorming with colleagues, these are things you need to consider for your overall implementation of the program. Performance goals and measures. So for any of our grants, we require reporting. So we would help you with your implementation plan and to determine what your goals will be. And for an example of this would be the number of youth that you're enrolling in the program, the number of youth that actually complete your program, the number that obtain credentials. So as you can see, those are some of the things that we would ask you to report on. In addition, there would be other things that we'd want to keep track of, like number of businesses engaged, number of youth placed in a pre-apprenticeship, things like that. So you'll see once you get, if you do become a grantee, we would actually go more into detail on the actual goals and measures, but just to be upfront, kind of getting an idea of some of the things that you would be responsible for. Priorities, program priorities, you can, anybody can, that's an eligible entity can obviously apply for this funding opportunity, but we have a couple priorities that we're really looking at that could additionally score a little bit more in their application because we are really trying to focus on this. And the first one is any entity focusing on EV. The second is entities serving rural students. And then the third one is partnering with any of the community college boards Rev Up EV Community College Grant. They have, this was a great question that came up already. This is round one. So in the notice of funding opportunity, the entities that I put in there were the current grantees from the round one. So if you're a round two or familiar with a round two, and even in the future round three, those were not included in the notice of funding opportunity because of the timing of when the notice of funding opportunity was approved and going through the channels. But we would grant, we would honor if you also wanted to partner with a round two or round three grantee in your application. So if you know that you're possibly going to be partnering with one that you don't see on this in the NOFO as listed, but you know they are, go ahead and write round two grantees in there, and we will honor that as a priority. The next is the funding information. The total amount for this award is going to be 5 million. So our awards would range approximately 100,000 to 500,000 per grantee. We anticipate possibly 10 to 15 awards. Well, we would have to see how many meet the criteria, but the planning period again could be less than a year if you're ready for implementation. So it's a 2-year award though. Application and submission. Make sure you're paying attention always in the application and submission portion so you don't miss the due date. Unfortunately, if it's even a minute late, our system won't count it as a eligible application. So we'd hate for you to miss out on that. So we always encourage applicants to please submit early. We do it through a smart sheet, and in case you have any problems or anything, you definitely want to try to submit that early just so you don't lose out on the opportunity. The due date is 5 p.m. on November 12th, but again, encourage you to try to get that in a little bit quicker. When you're looking at the notice of funding materials on our webpage, you'll see that there's different required documents that you'll need to submit. There's the program application, the uniform application, conflict of interest disclosure, and then the mandatory disclosure, the uniform budget, and the NOFO supplement. I'm going to go over that guided application, but just remember to include all your documents in that smart sheet before you submit. Okay, I want to go over the review information now. Like I said, I'll pull up the application in a minute, or in the PowerPoint later, you'll see the application. I kind of pulled it out, but I want to first go over the review criteria. This is listed right in the notice of funding opportunity as well, but we go off of 4 key components, which are capacity, need, program plan, and budget. So first one is capacity. If you can see, I pulled a little picture of what it looks like from the funding opportunity. This is the capacity portion that shows you the possible points. It tells you what you'll be scored on. And so then when you're creating your application, you'll know the possible points it takes to get that and what kind of things we're looking for. So we do this in a guided application, which again, we'll pull up in a minute, but really look at that rubric before you start writing your application so you can think about the overall process of this grant. This section of capacity we're looking for basically an example of, or you will give us an example of how you've ran past grants, like your grant history, things like that. Do you have the capacity internally to run a grant like this? Because obviously there's different parts of a grant that you would need, you need people to look at the budget, and you need people to deal with the program. And do you have all the possible pieces in place right now? Do you have the capacity? So they're going to be asking questions that has to do with that in the capacity section, just to make sure that you're ready to run a grant. Need is a little bit shorter section for need. This is where you'll identify why you need a clean energy pathway program in your area. This section also will ask about low income students, just to make sure that they're being prioritized, and they'll want to anticipate about how many students in that low income that you would be serving. So that was the next section. That's going to give you 15 points for that one. The biggest section typically on our grants is the program plan. The program plan section is where you get to give the details of your program. This is kind of the fun stuff. You can tell us, in an elevator pitch, the overall, like what's happening with your program. You really get to do the details in this section. And then it'll also talk about, your curriculum. There's an actual curriculum worksheet in the application. So this is kind of where you'll do the meat and potatoes of the application. And then the last section, the smallest section, is the budget. The budget is high level narrative on what's happening in your program. In this section, applicants provide a high level budget narrative in addition to an Excel spreadsheet. And that's why my colleague Josh is on today. He'll be discussing the budget and any financial pieces after I finish here. And then in this section, in addition, you'll discuss a sustainability plan, because one thing that's important with our funding opportunities is this isn't just a one-off. This needs to be sustainable. So how are we going to continue to carry this on? That's the review criteria. And then just to reiterate, so you can see how the breakdown of the priority points, if you did have those priorities we talked about earlier, that could give you additional points. So you could have up to 9 additional points possibly. You could do 3, you could do 3, you could do 6, you could do 9, but that kind of gives you an idea of where that falls, because again, these are kind of by priorities of what we're looking for this opportunity. So now I wanted to quickly show you the application. Hopefully some of you have already kind of looked at it, but this is just a different, just wanted to pull it out just to make sure that you're understanding like where we're going with this. Like I said, it's a guided application. So the first part here is really important because it's the A through E. It's reminding you of things that you're going to need to make sure you have when you're submitting your application. And then at the bottom, the priority points, making sure you're selecting if you do have any or all or some of those priority points, you would go ahead and click those. Next is the just your applicant information about you, your legal name, your address, your contact. We ask for a primary contact and a secondary contact in case we need to reach you. And then this is also where you're going to select what type of how you're an eligible entity. So if you are partnering, well, you have to, but whatever school districts you're partnering with, or even if you're the school district, what is the school district? Who is it? What is the community college? What local workforce area number is it? What employer or employers? And that's where you say we'll submit that information. Next week, oops. Next, we will get into the first section that we just talked about, capacity. And in here, you'll see exactly what you'll do in that gray area. There's no limits on how much you are typing, and you should be able to, if you needed to copy and paste anything in, it should work. It's in a Word document, so it should be easier to navigate and copy and paste and things and not have limits. But you'll be able to write in there all the answers to these questions. So you can see the first 4 are just kind of like tell us, and they'll type it in there. The next one is the grant history chart. And this is where we like to see what prior grants you've had, and we just see what you've had before. Then we go into a couple more questions, and then the last one on this, you should see the staffing plan worksheet. That'll be the next thing. And this is kind of important because it's going to show, it's really going to show that capacity at a different level, because we all maybe think we have the capacity, but when you really start breaking down the duties of program administrator, outreach and recruitment, support services, and data, maybe you're like, oh gosh, do we have this all covered? Now, one person can do multiple things, obviously, but we just really want to make sure that you're thinking about the bigger picture in the grant management process to make sure that, you really do have that capacity to run this grant. And then it goes on and talks about the partner roles. Because we are requiring the partnerships, we want to make sure that you have partners and team leads for those partners at those entities. So who from the community college is your partner, which we would just call team lead, or support staff if you have it, and who's going to be that contact. So we know that you really have the true team of the local workforce area, the employer, the community college, and the local education agency, school district, however it may be. Next is the need, a couple of questions, just 3 questions on need, but again, trying to get at why is this program important in your area? And then it'll go into that program plan where we talked about the elevator pitch, your recruitment strategies, curriculum tool, which is the next one, that is actually broken out and giving you an idea of things that you need to start thinking about according to the curriculum and how that's going to look in your program. And then it breaks it down with the different competencies. And then it breaks it down again into the population served. These are what you're hoping for. I mean, it might not be an exact number. Obviously, total number served, you might have an idea, but we're just wanting you to put that in this so we have an idea of about the amount of students, in this case, you'll be serving, and then trying to break down what cost per student that is looking like when you look at work-based learning, when you look at direct training, when you looked at supportive services or barrier reduction, just an estimate of when you start breaking all this down, maybe the cost per. So that's why we do that. And then we look at barrier reduction funding and supportive services. And again, you might not know exactly, but just an idea of what barrier reduction you might be doing, work-based learning type, your business partners again, and employers, and then just kind of a brief description of what your pathway is going to look like. If you become a grantee, we would go into more detail on all that, but just up front, just kind of really thinking about those things because they would be required into the real process of the grant. So just kind of a ballpark on some of this, but just knowing that we would get into more detail later. And then of course, the last section is the budget, where we talked about you would do these questions here in addition to the Excel spreadsheet. And then the last part of the guided app is talking about the sustainability plan, because we have, are requiring these partners for this grant, and then thinking about how can these partners continue as this grant ends or throughout the years. These same partners, how is this going to be sustainable? And then next is reporting. So one of our requirements for reporting is the PPR and the PFR, so performance reporting and financial reporting. This is something that happens quarterly. And then in addition to that, we have a reporting system in Illinois WorkNet, where grantees also report on what's going on with their enrollments and services and things. So reporting is mandatory. We do go into more detail once grants are awarded. There'll be more technical assistance sessions on how to do this and stuff. So if you're not familiar with this, don't be worried, because we really walk all of our grantees through this process. Office hours. So today, like I said, we were going over the program, and then Josh is going to go over the financials. But for more technical assistance, hopefully some of this is helpful. And then as you go start writing your application, if more questions come up, on October 30th from 3 to 4 and November 6th from 2 to 3, we are holding office hours, and you can come in and ask any specific questions that you're having in the application process. And there's the link to that is on the link to the page where you signed up for this one. So you should all have that. We can throw it in the chat too, but those office hours are important if you need some additional help. And that is all I have for the program side. Before we turn over to Josh, I can answer any questions, or is there any questions in the chat?
I had put a question in the chat on the program application. There's two charts to describe past grants the agency or the organization has experience with. Do you just want the two most recent grants, or do you want us to like copy and paste that chart and add additional spaces?
No, that's a great question. The two most recent is fine. We usually do 2 or 3, so 2 would be absolutely fine.
Okay.
And so no need to copy and paste. You can just do it right into that application.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Oh, round 2 institutions. I'm not sure if ICCB has posted that yet, but I will do some digging and see if I can find that, and then I'll have it updated on I'll send it to Carter, and we'll have that updated on this website if I can get the round 2 grantees. That's a great question. So I'll work on that on the backside. Sure. Any other questions? And if questions come up while Josh is talking at the very end, we can do additional questions. Okay. Well, thank you all for listening to that. And like I said, we'll do more questions later. But if you don't have anything right now, we'll go ahead and turn it over to Josh.
Thank you, Shannon. As she mentioned, my name is Josh Kuhn, so I'm a grant manager as well with the Department of Commerce in the Office of Employment and Training. I mainly deal with our Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act funding that we receive. But I'm going to be going over the budget with you all as well as a PowerPoint presentation on Grants 101 for those of you that may not or may be new to the grants game. But the first thing I'm going to do is share my screen and show you a resource for you all. Okay, so the Department of Commerce has our accountability team puts out this site that they're kind of are making more interactive. So I'll send the link here in the chat momentarily. I'll have to stop sharing, I think, actually. Here we go. Let's see if that works. If not, if that doesn't work, I'll send another one once I'm done presenting. But so this here, it has these 4 spill outs that go through, and the first one here is apply for funding. So here you can see all of our open notice of funding opportunities, and then here's the clean energy career pathway. Once you click on that, it's going to take you to the information related to the NOFO and then any of the attachments that you all will need. So I'm going to cover these bottom 4 here. I believe Shannon covered the first 2. So the first one that you'll see is the uniform grant application. So if you click on that, it's going to take you to this PDF. We filled out the agency completed section that's listed here. So your responsibility would be the applicant completed section. So you'll fill out information related to your organization. So it asks for the contact for your business administrative matters, your program and project matters, and then the amount of funding you're coming in for. So you'll want to make sure that this application meets the amount that your uniform budget is coming in for as well. So those amounts should equal. Then it'll have you complete your mandatory disclosure and your conflict of interest disclosure. So that's as simple as reading through this, making sure none of them are applicable, checking, no, there are no violations, and then signing it by an authorized representative. And that's the same thing for the conflict of interest form. So those will all need to be in your submission for this grant. And then the last thing that I didn't go over is the uniform budget template. I'm going to run through some slides first. This just talks about the actual process of getting pre-qualified and things along those lines. And then we'll dive into the budget template. I know some of you on this call are, this is the initial session for you all. So you're just kind of trying to understand what the NOFO is about. So you might not have your fiscal staff on here, but good news is that this is recorded, so they can come look at this as well as I'll join in those office hours. So if your fiscal staff have any issues filling out the uniform budget. All right, so we're going to run through some slides here. I'm not going to go in PowerPoint mode, but so this is the Workforce 101, our Grants 101. This presentation is going to be strictly related to the pre-award process of the grants. So obviously, once you all are notified that you're awarded, then you'll be in the award phase and then post-award at the end of the grant. So we're governed by the Grant Accountability and Transparency Act. That's for all state our departments. It's supposed to be a standardized way for us to increase accountability and transparency on grant funds, reduce administrative burden on agencies and grantees, and it adopted the 2 CFR 200. So some pre-award requirements that must be completed prior to the grant award execution. So that's once you all are awarded, you'll want to make sure that you're GATA pre-qualified, and we'll talk about the different steps that you may need to do so for that. You'll also make sure that once you're in that portal that you've selected an indirect cost rate. We use the centralized indirect cost rate system. If you already have a grant, then you may have already elected that for this year. But we'll ask that you go in there and select an indirect cost rate, and we'll talk about the different options that you have available if you're newer to choosing an indirect cost rate. So all grantees must be registered with the state of Illinois using an illinois.gov authentication portal. A person or business email address is required to establish. Registration is completed by browsing, and then there's the link, and we'll provide these slides to you all as well. And then associating your illinois.gov account with your organization. Completing that process triggers the pre-qualification verification. Pre-qualification means that you have a valid DUNS number, you have a current sam.gov account, you're in good standing with the Secretary of State, and you're not on any of the listed stop pays or excluded parties lists that are there. And just keep in mind that pre-qualification is dynamic, and it verifies, verifications are completed overnight. So you may be pre-qualified one day, your sam.gov account expires, and the next day you're no longer able to receive payments from your grant money. So it's important that you maintain good standing in all those aspects throughout the life of the grant. If there are no issues, then the GATA portal will send an email communicating that you're pre-qualified or you're qualified. That's great. That means that you're able to do business with us. Like I said, some of the issues that we see where they're not pre-qualified or the DUNS number isn't current, SAM cage code isn't current, and they're not in good standing with the Secretary of State. All right, so part of the application process, or excuse me, part of the awarding process is we kind of assess your risk, and then it's required that we put that information in your grant agreement, and that's for each individual organization that we award funds to. So the way we do that is we have you guys complete 2 risk assessments. There's a fiscal risk assessment. It's called the internal control questionnaire. It is automated, and it's actually through that portal that I was showing you before. So once you get registered, you'll complete that on a yearly basis. And I believe it's a rolling thing. So if you already have if you already have a grant with DECIO, or really, I think it actually might apply to all grants with the state, then if you've already completed this year, you wouldn't have to do it specifically for this grant. However, the programmatic risk assessment is specific to this grant opportunity. I don't believe it's been given to you all yet. That'll be completed once you are awarded the grant funds, and we'll send you a separate document. You'll complete it, we'll score it, and then if we have any issues or any things that we'd like to add to your grant agreement, then we'll do so. But your risk profiles are determined based off of those 2 risk assessments that you complete. All right, so talking about indirect cost rate selection, all grantees must select an indirect rate cost option in the centralized indirect rate system. That's even if you're waiving any indirect costs, we still will ask that you complete that in the portal. If you're looking to negotiate an indirect cost rate because you haven't done so with any previous grants that you've had, or you're expired on the rate that you have approved, Then you'll go into negotiations and you'll elect that through the portal, and then you'll receive an email from Crow, who's our third-party vendor that negotiates your indirect cost rate with you. The options that you do have available is you have a current federal negotiated rate. So I believe if you can receive a federal rate if you receive a certain amount of grant funds. I want to say it was roughly like 35 million the last I checked. So if you receive more than that, then you probably already have a rate, and you are able to bring that to the grant that you'll have with us. If you don't have a current federal rate, nor do you have a state rate, then you can go into negotiations. And like I said, we use Crow for that. The other option is just probably the most common is elect to use the federal 10% de minimis rate. A lot of our grantees are smaller organizations, so maybe with this NOFO, you guys may all have state rates, and it might not be an issue. But we'll go over how you calculate that 10% de minimis, and then or here in a little shortly with the budget. And then the last option that we see often is elect to decline any indirect cost rate. So some individuals or some organizations that we work with choose not to collect or select any of them at all. All right. So who's required to use the centralized indirect cost rate system? Any organization that receives a grant from the state of Illinois. And if a grantee organization has a federally negotiated rate, they're allowed to bring that down to this grant. If the grantee organization chooses to elect 10% de minimis, they're required to make an election in the indirect cost rate system. And a grantee may volunteer to accept a lower indirect cost rate, but state agencies are not allowed to force or coerce a grantee to take a lower rate. All right, so uniform application for state grant assistance, that's that form that we went over already, but it just tells you that you're responsible for the agency information, and then the applicant, you're responsible for the applicant completed section, and then the certification portion. The agency information is already filled out for you all. The uniform budget template, so we use, all state agencies use the same template. Some of us have made small changes to it, but most of it, the material aspect of it is all the same, but it's modeled after the standard form 524. And we ask that when you're inputting costs or budget items into your budget, that you try to follow the three requirements that 2 CFR 200 labels. So it's allowable, reasonable, and allocable. And we'll go into those now. I feel like a lot of the times with some of our grants, like the biggest issue or something that a grantee may come to us later on when we've already been awarded is, hey, can I pay for this with grant funds? And really it's such a, it's not, sometimes it can be a gray area because 2 CFR 200 kind of leaves it up to be that. So it basically says that any cost that you're trying to have, trying to use grant funds for, it needs to follow these three rules. And if you can explain it under, these three rules, then it's an allowable, cost with grant funds. So as long as you can tie it back to, your program specifically, then most likely, when we can see the benefit from it, then most likely you're going to be able to, use grant funds for that. So it has to be an allowable cost. It's necessary and reasonable for the performance of the award, and be allocable under the award cost principles. Some of our awards, even though they're not federally funded, we still adopt 2 CFR 200. So if you notice it, I can't remember if CJ, I think it's its own, it's not federally funded. So if you see the word federal award, we still follow those principles. It has to be a reasonable cost. So whether a cost is of a type generally recognized as ordinary and necessary for the operation of the non-federal entity or the proper and efficient performance of the federal award. And if you're interested, to try to, run through these three steps with something you're trying to purchase, then we have them listed here. So like 2 CFR 200 404 talks about reasonable costs, and allowables 403. And then the third section is allocable, which is 405. So a cost is allocable to a federal award or cost objective if the goods or services involved are chargeable and assignable to that award or cost objective in accordance with relative benefits received. So again, it just has to, as long as it's supporting the program, then you're in good shape. All right, there's two types of costs that you will see in the budget or that you'll apply to this grant. There's your program funds and your administrative funds, and then there's direct and indirect costs in both of those. So direct costs are costs that can be identified specifically with a particular final cost objective, such as an award or other internally or externally funded activity, or that can be directly assigned to such activities. So most of the costs that you'll see in the budget will be direct costs. And then there's those other situations, so indirect costs, which are for facilities and administration. Those are costs that are incurred for a common or joint purpose, benefiting more than one cost objective and not rarely assignable to a specific program or cost objective. So that could be salaries for some of your administrative folks. That's typically what we see the most for indirect costs. All right. So I'm going to switch over to the uniform budget template now. These next few slides just talk about it, and so I'll actually put it into, so you guys can visualize it here. So the first section of the budget template is the general instructions. These instructions just talk about the different parts of it. So selecting an indirect cost rate and how you complete the form. They're pretty generic, but we do try to check these to make sure they're accurate for each NOFO that we put out. This next is the section A. Anything in light blue is something you'll be responsible for. So your organization name, CSFA number, which you can find from the notice of funding opportunity. Your UEI, which is your unique entity identifier. I think that's kind of interchangeable with your DUNS number. I think though we would accept either in this box. The NOFO number that you're applying for, which is posted online as well, and then you won't know your grant number, so that part can be left blank. We wouldn't assign that until you've been awarded. So here are all the budget lines that are going to be available to you all, the budget expenditure categories. So we'll go over each one of these, but you'll see that each one of these categories has a specific tab. So the personnel tab has its own, or personnel section has its own tab here where you'd enter information. And if you go down the line, you'll see each one of these to the right here. So nothing is going to be filled in here for your total expenditures. You're going to complete that by actually going to the tab, typing the position in there, and then once you fill it out, it's going to actually copy that information over to this tab. So really at the end, all you're doing after you've entered in all your budget information, you're just coming here to make sure that everything is looking accurate. And then once you have that'll be your final total of the amount of funds that you're requesting. So just going back to this tab real quick. So at the top there, it kind of lists from 2 CFR 200 what the definition of personnel is. And then we have here a name, position, salary or wage basis, percent of time, and length of time. We ask that if you have that individual's name, then you give us that information, or someone that you have on staff. If we see a lot of TBD or to be hired, that can raise flags. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. We understand that some people, have to build capacity for this grant opportunity. But if you know that individual, put their name or initials of some sort, so we know that's a position that's already filled versus a position that you guys plan to hire. You can put their position in here, their salary, and then you can use year, month, or hour. If they're an hourly employee, that's fine. You can enter that information in here. The percent of time that they're going to be dedicated to this program, and then the length of time. So, for some of you all, if this is a 2-year grant, or if you're using all 2 years for instead of the planning year, then you would have a 2 there. So you're budgeting twice the amount. The only other thing is on each of these budget tabs, there's a personnel narrative. It's important that any section that you have budget dedicated to, there's a narrative. So that can be that, Jill, the case manager, will be working with, just giving us a description of the duties that person's going to fill that is related to this program. And the next section here is your fringe benefits. So these are all kind of laid out the same. They give a description from 2 CFR 200. We want the name, the position, and then like the base salary that we're applying your fringe rate to. So usually in this narrative, we ask for that fringe rate. So if you come up with 14.5%, then we want to know how you came up with that. So what's that covering? Like workers' comp insurance, Social Security, anything like that. How you determine that rate, we would like to see down there. Travel. So this one, we don't really harp on very much. So at the end of the day, if you guys want to see that, if you want to budget $1,000 for travel, then do what you need to do to get to that. So we understand that over the next 2 years, you don't know why you're going to need to travel. So you can put the purpose of travel TBD or site monitoring or whatever that may be. Same thing with location. The rate that you reimburse for. So I can't remember what the federal rate is right now, but we'll use 0.57. We'll say, we don't have to put a basis, I don't think. We'll say for 500 miles and we'll say one trip. So you'll see that like you kind of have to play with these to get them to go where you want them to, or the amount that you want. So if you're trying to get to $1,000, then if you just put a quantity of 2,000 here, to budget $1,000 for travel, then that's fine too. We're not gonna be like, well, what's that travel for? Like as long as it's related to the program, then we're not gonna need you to have exact travel itineraries set up for us. All right, so equipment. So just keep in mind the big thing here is that with 2 CFR 200, equipment and supplies, a lot of people confuse those two. So equipment is defined as anything with an acquisition cost of $5,000 or more. So you would think a computer, would go under equipment, but if it doesn't cost more than $5,000, then technically on this form, it's a supply. So just keep in mind for that. We don't see a lot of equipment purchased, and it's totally acceptable if you do have some equipment. Just give us a good narrative down here of how that's going to benefit your program to make sure that it's approved. Like I said, supplies, obviously anything you can think of related to the program is mainly going to go here for supplies. So if you have questions about that, just let us know. Contractual services and subawards. So if you have subawards that you're passing the funding through to another organization, that's kind of where this would go here. Anything contractual that you have, you'd list on this tab. Consultant services and expenses. So if you guys, have any like specific skill that you bring an outside organization to complete for you, any kind of consultant really, then this is the tab that you'd complete that for. Occupancy, so this is related to your rent and utilities. This one's pretty self-explanatory. You just enter the information and then explain, what those costs are related to. R&D, we don't see a lot of research and development items budget, and so I won't go over it, but if you have questions, just reach out to us. Let me see if there's, okay, so this is one that I'll talk about here is your direct training and your work-based training. So the way we have it done, or we've completed, is there's this large section that's like your direct training costs, but we've entered these sublines here. So your occupational skills training, upgrade training, entrepreneurial training, job readiness, adult ed and literacy, and supportive services. So this is the section that you'll actually complete versus just the reason that I bring this up is because the way our system for reporting works is we have grantees attempt to try to report costs directly onto this direct training line, but we've created these sublines for you all to report costs. That way you can transfer them from occupational skills training to support services easy without doing a whole budget modification, which you'll understand to be, save a lot of time that way. So that's why I made a point to bring that up. Same thing with your work-based training. So work-based training is the generic term that we use, but there's different descriptions that we have here. So apprenticeship, pre-apprenticeship, work experience, internship, transitional jobs, OJT, customized training, and then incumbent worker training. One thing I'll point out is, so we have 2 tabs here, miscellaneous other costs and other program costs. So obviously with other program costs, those are costs that you didn't necessarily see fitting under your work-based training or direct training. So anything, any program costs that you didn't think could be classified elsewhere, you didn't put on the other program. The good thing is with the application, like we said, we're not going to dock you all for misclassifying items in your budget. Once they review it, as long as it makes sense and it flows with your program implementation plan and your narrative, then you'll receive the points for this section. Once you're awarded and we notice that you misclassified something, that's when we'll come back to you all and let you know, hey, this could actually be considered this cost. So just do your best on the actual application and submission, and classifying items, and then we can work with you all once you're awarded to fix any issues. Another section here is your barrier reduction fund. I don't recall if you guys will be using barrier reduction a lot with this program. It's still available to you all, and so I think Shannon, are you still with us? Will they be using barrier reduction a lot?
They could. So this
They
is
do
good
have the
to go.
possibility.
Yeah,
Okay.
it is. Yep.
Okay, great. So yeah, this is just where you'll input your barrier reduction funds, and then you'll explain in the narrative, what those funds will be used for. So to pay for court fees, whatever it may be. And your last section is your indirect costs. So I purposely skipped a few tabs at the beginning, and we'll go back to those now. So this ICI tab is again, you're going to select your indirect cost rate information. So whatever you have in the portal that we talked about should be here. So if you guys are choosing the 10% of modified total direct costs, then you'll select that here. The good thing is that we have this indirect worksheet that we have made available to you all that kind of helps organizations complete or determine their direct cost base. And a lot of times, like I said, our grantees use the 10% MTDC, but then they don't know which costs they're able to use, they have to exclude from their direct cost base. So we have this notes column here, and it says specifically for the de minimis, or MTDC as we call it, which sections can be included. So if you guys had 75,000 in personnel costs, and it says included in indirect cost base, that means that at the bottom here, it can be applied to your indirect rate. So you don't have to exclude it. But if I hit exclude here, you'll see it takes it away, and it says, okay, that 75 grand can't be applied to your indirect rate. Let's see. So for example, your supportive services or barrier reduction, we'll go with that. So if you have budgeted 120 grand for barrier reduction, we're saying that with the de minimis rate, none of that can be considered, in your indirect cost calculation. So all of that would have to be excluded. So you'd go through these notes here if you're using 10% de minimis to determine which categories are excluded and which ones are included. If you're using a federal rate or a state rate that's only applicable to your personnel or fringe, then you would pretty much exclude everything. So any line that's not personnel or fringe, you would pull over here. And then so that'll give you a base of just the 100 grand that's applied to your indirect cost rate. So what I mean by applying to your indirect cost rate is, so once you complete this worksheet, you'll determine, okay, like out of the 220,000 that we're requesting, 100 of it can be applied to our indirect cost rate. So you'd go back to your indirect cost tab and put that base here. So $100,000, and you put an indirect cost rate or selection. Your base is $100,000, and you're saying that your rate is 10%. So that will calculate how much indirect costs you're allowed to take on this grant. So if you go back to the Section 8 tab, you'll see that that's entered in there. A lot of grantees, like I said, will use a federal rate. So sometimes it's like a wonky number, like 24.2%. So of 100 grand, you'd be able to use $24,200 in indirect costs that you'd be able to apply for this grant. So really, the worksheet is required if you are taking indirect costs. If you're not taking any at all, then you can leave this section blank. But it's just there to help grantees figure out their base to apply to their indirect rate that they're bringing into this grant. The last thing here is your certification page. So on this, we just ask that one or two individuals, it doesn't matter, how many, it can be one, it doesn't have to be both, but it has to be a CFO or a director of some sort, signs off on this form. So we ask that you just PDF this form and then submit it with your actual uniform budget template. Let me see. And this just gives a breakdown of the funds that you have budgeted. So in this example, we just put in funds for personnel and travel in the actual budget specific tabs. So we're coming in for $62,840. The only thing I didn't go over is matching funds or non-state funds that are listed here. So, and I'll briefly touch this just so it doesn't confuse you all when you're filling this out, but some programs require grantees come in with any non-state funds that they're using as leverage to this program. So each tab has a non-state total. If you'd like to fill that out, if you have other funds that that are going to help facilitate this program, then you're more than welcome to show that to us. But it's not a requirement. So anything that says non-state or like section B, this auto populates all your non-state funds into this category. So I won't go over that anymore, just in case, I don't want to confuse anyone, but I'm sure you're already confused with this form. But if you have questions, just let me know. We are available, and I'll be in on those office hours, so your fiscal folks can ask questions as well. So I'm going to stop sharing here and see if we have questions.
So Josh, in the ISB grants that we administer, in addition to that, like federal guidance on, is it, allowable? Is it reasonable? We usually have like an additional, sheet of maybe 20 items that ISB designates as unallowable. Like no matter what justification you give, we never support, I'll just give an example, out-of-state student travel for CTSO competitions. Does that exist with your agency? Is there a sheet somewhere that's like, no matter what, DCEO never funds this?
I don't know of one. I can talk to our accountability office to see if they have something related to that. But as far as long as I've worked here, just 5 years, I've never heard of anything similar to that. I've heard of grantees coming in with costs or questioning costs and then them being denied, but I don't know of an actual like cheat sheet for costs that we specifically say that'll never be allowed.
So if we just describe everything we would do with the money, then if there's something you see in there that wouldn't be allowed, you would communicate that when you're communicating whether our grant was accepted or not.
Exactly.
Okay,
Correct.
so just put it all in there and then we'll see.
Yeah, and like I said, the more information you all can give us on the budgeted items, the better. So because that will let us know, like, okay, what were they thinking here? Like, what's the game plan on, can we allow that or not? So yeah, the more information in there, the better for us.
And then what is the smart sheet that Shannon referred to where you like put everything, like you put your application?
Shannon, are you able to answer that one?
So in the actual NOFO, there should be a link that would take you to the smart sheet, and that's where you're going to upload everything. From my perspective, I can't really see like what you see. So if you have any questions when you're doing it, please reach out and I'll try to figure out someone that can answer those questions. But essentially, that's where instead of kind of like in the old days when you would just submit your application through the mail and things like that, now we're incorporating all our applications through Smartsheet. So you're just uploading everything, and it should be guiding you and making sure you're hitting on all the components needed. So that way you make sure you're submitting a completed application.
I see it. Thank you.
If you have any questions, yeah, when you're going through it, if you do, please just reach out. I'll put my email in the chat, and like we said, we'll be on the office hours too.
Perfect. Thank you.
And I think the use of that smart sheet is like relatively newer. So like you wouldn't be punished for incorrect. I would hope, they wouldn't, rule you out because you forgot to submit something.
It
through their
is.
smart sheet.
It is newer. That's exactly right. So yeah, it's definitely a learning curve for us all. But I think in the long run, it's actually better. It'll actually be better. So
Josh, I just finished a DCOE grant for facilities, and there was and forgive me if I missed this portion of it. There was a choice at some point where you could it was full reimbursement grant, or you could apply as you went for funds throughout the grant cycle. How is this one all reimbursement? How does this work?
So yes, so I'm not sure what department you're working with on that one, but all of OET grants are reimbursement based. So the way it works, and once you guys would be awarded, I would show you our system that you'll be reporting in and how to request reimbursement. But essentially, you can request reimbursement as often as you'd like. So if you wanted to twice a week, go in, report costs, and request a cash request, then that comes to us for approval, and we would approve it as long as you have costs backing that up. There is an opportunity, and it depends on every grant, so it is different. But there's a cash advance upfront. So I think most of the time OET writes their grants with a 20% advance. So if you needed those working funds to get the program going, you would just have to provide justification, and we could give that to you. But other than that, it's typically reimbursement based.
That's exactly what it was. I was working with Shauna Mays on it. I'm not, she's with you guys over there, but okay, that was my only question. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. And it is a little weird. So it's different offices in DCO do it differently. Like that office might actually enter the cost for you, and you just send them all of your documentation. We actually have you guys go and give access to our system, and you guys report your costs for your organization. So we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But the system is kind of archaic, so there are a lot of issues that grantees have. But
yeah, this is actually what you have going here is better than the other one. It was a little more clunky. This seems like it's more streamlined, especially with that smart sheet that I think is really going to be handy for us. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Any other questions? It's a lot of information and not a lot of details. We try to go over what we can, but so if you guys have questions related to the budget, then feel free to ask me. There's no stupid questions.
I guess one other stupid question. It sounds like you have 22 other grantees at this point. Does that sound right to you?
not for this grant. So that is the partnership with the ICCB grantees. So that was just for priority points. This grant is brand new. We've never had this grant before, but
Okay.
it was just encouraged to partner with that. And that is also a newer grant through ICCB, but they're on their round 2 of that. So I'm sorry if that was confusing, but that was more for the partnership.
So that was me not paying close attention. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Sure. Well, if no one else has any questions, like we said, feel free to reach out to us. Hopefully, if you need any more help, you can catch us on those office hours. I want to give a big thank you to Josh for helping out and Carter for administering this for us today. We appreciate all of your attendance and look forward to reading your applications, hopefully. Thank you.